Hello boys, welcome back to another session of video tutorials, and this session is meant for class 11th biology students, and this is for 18th December 2020. And as all of us know, we are into the revision mode and we are revising all important chapter number 17, breathing and exchange of gases. As part of it, in our previous session we talked about the mechanism of breathing. As well, we talked about pulmonary volumes and capacities, and I have listed the values also in my previous session, and that will give you exact idea of how well we breathe and how effectively we are doing this breathing. Now we talk about the exchange of gases, how exactly the gases get exchanged. Now basically the exchange of gases take place between oxygen and carbon dioxide, and where this takes place, in two places it takes place, exchange of gases, that is alveoli to blood. First one, alveoli, small round holes present in the lungs. So from lungs to blood, where is blood present? Inside the blood capillaries. Second, between blood and tissues. So these are the two sites where there is exchange of gases. Now, diagrammatically speaking, you can see here the inhaled air or inspired air getting into the lungs. This is alveoli, one alveoli we are taking. And then once this enters inside alveolar air, partial pressure of oxygen is around 104 mmHg. Okay? And then the carbon dioxide partial pressure, the carbon dioxide which has to go out in the form of exhaled air or expired air, has to be 40 mmHg. So if these values are maintained within the alveoli, then there is exchange of gases, oxygen coming in, carbon dioxide going out. And once this CO2 or O2 enters into the alveoli or present in the alveoli, has to enter into the either pulmonary vein or pulmonary artery. As you know, pulmos means lungs, and pulmonary vein, pulmonary artery are connected to pulmos, lungs. And I have also told you when I was giving you the video tutorials that these two blood vessels are exceptions. Normally vein carries impure blood, artery carries pure blood, but here reversal. Pulmonary vein carries pure blood, that is oxygen will be there in the blood. So we say that pulmonary vein from alveoli carries oxygenated blood, and as you are seeing, reaches to left auricle and left auricle to left ventricle. So that is the reason why left auricle and left ventricle will be always oxygenated blood. And this from left ventricle moves to the systemic arteries in this fashion. And when it is carrying the oxygenated blood, the systemic arteries also should maintain these values. That is, partial pressure of oxygen should be 95 mmHg and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40 mmHg. And from there, systemic arteries, it enters into the body tissues, various tissues that are present in the organs. So the oxygen enters into the tissues, and then inside every cell has got glucose. So glucose plus oxygen respiration, cellular respiration takes place. As a result, every cell gets energized. 36 ATP, remember I told you? So every cell gets 36 ATP molecules. As a byproduct, CO2 will be formed, and that CO2 will be released from cell, now enters into systemic veins. So systemic veins are the veins that carry carboxygenated blood, and here their main function is to carry deoxygenated blood. That means carbon dioxide is there. And again, in the systemic veins, the values that are to be maintained is partial pressure of oxygen should be 40 mmHg and partial pressure of carbon dioxide should be just 45 mmHg. Now I want you to focus on these values and these values. Look at that. So that is the reason why exchange of gases take place. And once the carbon dioxide mixed blood coming into the systemic veins enter back to the heart. So there it is the right auricle and right ventricle. And from right ventricle through pulmonary artery, I said pulmonary artery is an exception, enters into the alveolus, and the alveolus carbon dioxide goes out in the form of expired air. Oxygen which is being inhaled enters back into the pulmonary vein. This is how the exchange of gases takes place. So overall, the partial pressure of oxygen of the alveolar air has to be 104 mmHg, which is higher than partial pressure of oxygen, that is something like the partial pressure of oxygen in blood alveolar or alveolar capillaries. How much is that? 95 mmHg. Now see, the partial pressure of oxygen in the lungs or in the alveoli is 104 mmHg. Whereas when same thing comes to the tissues or the arteries, how much it is? From 104 mmHg it is coming to 95 mmHg. So due to this partial pressure difference, oxygen diffuses rapidly from alveolar air into the blood of alveolar capillaries. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide of blood reaching the alveolar capillaries is just 45 mmHg, which is higher than partial pressure of carbon dioxide in alveolar air, that is 40 mm only, 40 mmHg. Therefore, carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood of alveolar capillaries into the alveolar air. In tissues, exchange of gases occur between the blood and tissue cells through interstitial fluid. The blood reaching the tissue capillaries has partial pressure of oxygen which is 95 mmHg, which is higher than that in the tissue cells. How much tissue cells? It is just 40 mmHg, which is lower than that in the tissue cells. So the tissue cells constantly use oxygen in oxidation that produces carbon dioxide. Therefore, they always have lower partial pressure of oxygen and higher partial pressure of carbon dioxide than the blood coming to them. Because of the differences in partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of carbon dioxide between blood and tissue cells, as you are saying, oxygen separates from oxyhemoglobin and diffuses from the blood into the tissue fluid and then into the every cell of the tissue. And carbon dioxide diffuses from the tissue cells into the tissue fluid and then onto the blood in the capillaries. So this is how the partial pressure plays crucial role in exchange of gases. And exchange of gases occurs simply diffusion due to pressure or concentration gradient, solubility of the gases and thickness of the membrane. These are the other factors that influence the exchange of gases. Pressure contributed by individual gas in a mixture of gas is called partial pressure. See, pressure contributed by individual gas in a mixture of gases is called partial pressure, represented by PCO2 and PO2. Partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide at different parts involved in diffusion varies from one part to another and moves from higher partial pressure to lower partial pressure. Solubility of CO2 is 20 to 25 times more than solubility of oxygen. So, carbon dioxide diffuses much faster through membranes. Diffusion membrane is a 3-layered thick, that is alveolar squamous epithelium, endothelium of alveolar capillaries and basement membrane in between them. Okay, as you are seeing in the diagram. So you can see 3 layers. This is the basement membrane and outer membrane and inner membrane. So alveolar cavity, alveolar wall which is one celled thick, and blood capillaries supplying blood. Now, transport of gases. Blood is the medium of transport for CO2 and O2. 97% of oxygen is transported through RBC and remaining 3% by blood plasma. 20 to 25% of CO2 is transported by RBC, 70% as bicarbonates, and rest 7% is in dissolved state by blood plasma. So this is how the oxygen and CO2 gases transport themselves. Now let's go to transport of oxygen. In transport of oxygen, as all of you know, major role is played by the pigment, red colored pigment called hemoglobin, Hg. Hemoglobin is present in RBC, combines with oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin. Wherever oxyhemoglobin is present, that blood is called pure blood. So each hemoglobin combined with 4 oxygen molecules. Binding of oxygen is related with the partial pressure of oxygen and the partial pressure of CO2. Hydrogen ion concentration and temperature. So these are the 3 factors that influence O2 binding with hemoglobin. Percentage saturation of hemoglobin and partial pressure of oxygen forms sigmoid curve, or we say oxygen dissociation curve. Remember that we have drawn one graph where on x-axis we have taken partial pressure of oxygen in mmHg and percentage of saturation of hemoglobin on the y-axis. If you remember, we have put that almost S-type curve, sigmoid type curve. So just recollect that graph. Okay, that is oxygen dissociation curve. In the alveoli, partial pressure of oxygen is more and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less. Less H plus ion concentration and lower temperature favor binding of oxygen with hemoglobin. Now you must remember these conditions. That is, less H plus ion concentration, lower temperature, and of course partial pressure of oxygen should be more than partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Then only oxygen will bind with hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin will be formed. Where opposite condition in tissues favor the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. So this is how the transport of oxygen takes place, and we will talk about transport of carbon dioxide. Before that, tonight what I want you to do is just see the graph oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, and also find out what is Bohr's